It's been 2 years since we first started to build Fanhome's R2-D2 and Iron Man. And now it's time to answer the question that we asked 2 years ago. Is it worth it? Better stay tuned. This is your Geek Fix. It's funny, when I set these up, I wasn't anticipating just how big they are. I mean, they are huge. And it's hard to tell when you see the ads online or when you look at pictures just how big these are. This is supposed to be half scale. Iron Man, I'm still trying to figure out. He's bigger than my 1/4 scale Iron Man. To give you a little bit of an idea, here's a diagram that shows you your 1/12 scale versus your 1/6 scale versus your 1/4 scale. And then here's the Fanhome Iron Man. Also, he's mostly metal. He's Iron Man. He's very heavy, so this isn't like just a standard toy. He's huge, and his base also. The base is huge. Vince was saying that it's about the size of Captain America's shield. It is. It's hard to know where even to put him. As you can see, it fills up this whole table here. The only place I've been able to place him so far is on the floor. But at the same time, with his size, that actually isn't bad. It looks pretty good. He's about as tall as my cabinet is that sits next to him. And I'll tell you, it was a lot of fun to build these. It's funny because we are here now 2 years later. Actually, I think a little over 2 years later. So I know that a lot of people get scared by the fact of the amount of time that they think it's going to be, but really, it went by fast for me, and I really enjoyed it. But let's go back to the beginning, shall we? For those of you that might not watch this channel regularly or listen to our podcast, 2 years ago, it was 2 years ago that I was live streaming and was talking about Fanhome, actually, because I was interested. I was authentically interested, and I said on there, you know, I just wasn't sure, though. I wasn't sure about what the experience would be like. I wasn't sure, you know, what kind of a setup this was. And also because of the price, I knew I had to pick one, and I didn't know which one I should pick. And I said, if Fanhome wanted to reach out to us and collaborate, I'd be happy to check it out. And surprisingly, 2 days later, I received an invitation to do just that. Now, I'm no stranger to part building or build-up models, which is what these are. It goes all the way back to the 70s and 80s. I remember you would go to the comic book store, or you go to the model shop, and they'd have these magazines of some of your favorite things, either a comic book or some movie franchise. Radio Shack even have magazines that would allow you to put together a working radio or small computer. The problem with those was that when you went into the store, you could only purchase the subscription or the issue that was available. And so unless you happened to be in there on day one, that meant that you were buying something that you had to then wait until the end to cycle around and possibly, you know, complete it. But they also had a way that you could subscribe. The magazines would come to your home, and then you just put it together there, and you could start from the beginning and get through to the end. And one of the big draws too was that these were kind of limited. I mean, not everyone was going to do it, so that meant that what you had was kind of unique and had a greater value. These days, these subscriptions tend to come in boxes that have 4 weeks worth of stages. So you get 4 magazines with 4 stages for building, and then on occasion you'll also get a free gift. And this is where I didn't get the chance to really experience this the way I should. The guys and I were talking recently on our podcast about whether or not I would do it again, or if I would, you know, do another model. And I said I wasn't sure, because if I did, I'd probably just, you know, do it the way everyone else does, because I missed out. The thing I missed out on was that when these boxes arrive, it's not meant for you to just tear through it, throw together the model. The whole purpose of this is an experience, one that you're able to savor each week. So you get these 4 magazines, and you set aside some just me time that you're able to just read through and really experience things. I mean, it's broken down enough and it contains enough information that really you could almost even spread it out across the week. And then there's this point where you take a break and you get to actually assemble a little bit of it, and then you do the same thing the next week. For me, I had to do it all at once. So literally, I had to open up a box on film and have to go through the whole thing in about 30 minutes, which I will say this, something for you to know is it looks like I'm knocking through these fairly quickly. If you watch some people were like, you know, you took like 3 pieces and screwed them together. But the truth is, in the end, whatever you saw on film, you can pretty much multiply it by 4 times the length at least. And because there's so much that had to be done, and there's a lot of fast forwarding too. So truth be told, I think you'd have anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes at least of building with each of those magazines. Now, I also got some criticism about organization. I was determined this time to build these as if I was on an island, right? So basically only with whatever they sent me, because they send you screwdrivers. So for example, here is the screwdriver that they send you for Iron Man. This one is for R2 with the initial stages. And this one is magnetized. I like that. This one has a little bit of a longer shaft to it, which later on is definitely beneficial because you have to get into some pretty tight spaces. Eventually they send you a black one that also goes for Iron Man, and there's a small blue one that also comes with R2. And then they also send you a little organizer here for putting all your screws and bolts. And yeah, look at that. It's pretty much full. I still have a lot that are in here, but there's some things that they don't send with it. So they don't send you scissors. So I would open up all the bags with my teeth. Or I also didn't have anything to organize the screws, and I would literally, when I opened it up, I would just pour the screws into certain spots. There's little squares on here, and I would put it into there. I think people thought that it was a lot more out of control than it really was, but that was the main reason for doing it that way. Typically, I would probably use other things for organizing my builds. I will say though, with both of these, that the parts are also so big that it's hard, unless you have tons of space. There gets to be this point where it's hard to lay it all out and to put it together without it kind of using up a lot of that room. So that's something else also to consider. This isn't a little tiny model. This is something that's pretty good in its size. So you do want to dedicate some space and some time to it. I also kept my large boxes, because they send you large boxes every now and then. I would use one of them to keep all the parts in between. So you'll notice I didn't have to leave it on the table all the time when I wasn't building it. No, you can totally just put the parts into one of those big boxes and then put that box somewhere where it's not in the way. So it's not going to be something you have to leave out all the time. I think that was another concern some people asked me about. These are very different in their builds. I will say the experience is different, but their purposes are also different. One thing I really liked about Iron Man was that when they sent you screws, they tended to have the screws all in one baggie, and the bags were clearly marked. So you knew what type you were putting together, and when the instructions asked you to use that type of screw, it was pretty easy to do that. The other thing I really liked about that was that you generally didn't have more than one extra that you had to hold on to, or you didn't even need to hold on to the extra. When you were done with that stage, you didn't need those screws again. So there wasn't that much to organize or keep track of. With R2, they send you a lot of screws, a lot of small parts, some of which, when you get them, you don't do anything with them. You just got to hold on to them. And they're not as clearly marked. So I would say if I was to go back in time, I would do a lot of experimenting as I'm putting in different things. If I figure out which screw is the correct one and they've given me the name of it, I would have probably labeled it on here, just written it on there, so that I then knew where that screw was for in the future when I need it. So I did run out of screws a few times. It's nothing you probably couldn't get from your hardware store. They are kind of small screws, but at the same time, the thing that I really liked about the R2 build was that while Iron Man's went through and talked about, well, Iron Man, which by the way is my favorite MCU storyline. It covers all of the behind the scenes and, you know, the things from all the comics. I feel, or at least before I did this, I felt like I was an ultimate authority on Iron Man, and was surprised as I read through those magazines at how much stuff I didn't know, because they really pulled from everywhere. They even talk about some things that, you know, split-offs, for example, with some of the comics that didn't go very far, but, you know, how the storyline changes and some of the different universe things. Some things I wasn't aware of before. So that was pretty cool. I like that. But one thing I really liked about the R2 magazines was that, true, it talked about R2 and about Star Wars, which I also, before this, felt like I was a pretty good authority on. It really focused a lot on science, and specifically on what it is that you're going to be using. So for example, if it talked about sensors, well, you're going to be using sensors. You're going to be actually assembling them, testing them during that issue. You know, they talked at one point in time about step motors, and you actually got to assemble and test the step motor. It's very neat how all of this kind of worked out. I think if you work in education, like if I was working in grade school, middle school especially, and I'm looking for some STEM stuff to do, that R2 project would be perfect, because you know, each month we'd be getting these magazines, so each week we can have one dedicated period of time. It would use up about that amount of time. We'd be able to learn a little bit about something about what we're doing and then actually apply it. And with something that's kind of fun and has its own personality in the end. First recommendations that I give to you if you're just starting these builds, as you're going through, particularly with Iron Man, making sure that when you have to tighten screws, you're tightening them to the absolute tightest that you can. And be careful at the same time that you're not going to break anything. So sometimes if it's plastic to metal, of course, you're not going to want to over tighten that. But there's several pieces in here that are metal to metal, and the whole purpose is that you're creating joints. And with all the joints, every last one, including in his fingers, you want to make sure that they are as tight as you possibly can get them. Sure, it's going to feel like, well, I can't even make them move, and it asks you to test them sometimes to see that they do move. Quite frankly, if you can't move them, great. That's exactly where you want it. I did check out some other people that have gone through these builds and seen some of the errors that they made. And I think the most common one is that they went too light when they did the joints for Iron Man. So when they get to the end and they got them all together, well, suddenly underneath all of his weight, he's too loose. They can't get his arms to stick. They can't get his legs to hold and things. He's able to stand right now by himself. He also has this back area of the stand, though, that can help him, assist him in remaining standing or not get knocked over very easily. But I'd say that would be the biggest recommendation I would say to do with Iron Man, is make sure as you're going along that you're doing that, because going back to do that later on will be a real hassle and a problem. With Iron Man, I was surprised that there was more stages than I thought. Actually, both of them. I thought that there was 25 boxes with both of them. I don't know why I was thinking that, because of course the first one only comes with 2. So the last box was just box 26, comes with 2 for R2. But with Iron Man, there was another box 27. And the reason is because after you're done building him for the most part, and you actually have one that's basically standing, you still have some other parts that they give you, like this right here. This is a back piece that I can switch out. They just kind of click into each other. And the thing I like about this is that one problem with a lot of figures is that they are still stiff. You know, they're made in sections. It's unlikely that the whole back rotates the way that ours would, right? The spine would curve like this. And so they just basically made some parts that allow you to then pose him in different ways. So that when he's turned like this, then his back actually reflects that and it looks more natural. And then I was kind of surprised because they mentioned that there is parts that you can get to make him look battle damaged, and it is hard to make him look battle damaged without just trying to paint over it. The biggest reason is because the solid metal is actually solid in that color for the most part, and the plastic is so well painted. It really perfectly blends with the metal. So it would be very difficult to do some battle damaging without having to do a lot of compensating as well. And so they said, no, we'll just have you assemble another head that has battle damage to it, and another hand, and things like that. So at the end, you get to put together one last set of parts that are kind of similar to the parts you put together at the very beginning, that allow you to add that additional element of battle damage so that you can literally just pop off and pop on. And the whole thing is pretty well thought out. Initially, I wasn't so sure when I started putting them together, but the truth is, he's in pieces that do click together for that very purpose of being able to switch out parts easily and then put him into the poses that you want to keep him in. And the articulation is amazing. Every little finger. Every finger has all the joints that you have. You got the wrist, as well as that it'll turn, the arm, the elbow, we have 3 points at just the shoulder. You know, the head turns and pushes in and out. You got the waist and the legs, the bend, even the toes, the bend in the right places. Another thing I like about this Iron Man, I have a lot of different Iron Man. I have the Hot Toys version, I have the Sideshow version over here. Is most of my other ones don't have feet that light up. This one's, the feet actually also light up. However, I will say that I do have some long-term plans where I'd like to make the base where it permanently is lit and is a little bit brighter, as well as I want to put some lights into some different areas back here. For example, I really like how the backs of his legs open up and things, lighting those up with a little bit of a blue light, and then putting in some permanent lights here that I can just leave him plugged in all the time and he'd be lit up. That would be really neat. So that's kind of my future plan, is to do that as the next step or stage. With R2, the biggest thing that I would say is really read the instructions carefully. There's a structure inside of his head that's a plastic structure that you have to construct, and takes all these screws, and it's hard, it's tedious, and if you didn't pay close attention like I didn't, there came to be a point where it was almost all the way done. It was all the way done, and then I came to realize that it was at the very end, actually, when we went to put on the outer shell, that things weren't lining up quite right. And I was like, why isn't this lining up? And I figured out that there was 2 pieces that got transposed. And it wasn't like I could just take out those 2 pieces and flip them. No, I had to take apart the entire thing to do that. If I would have caught it earlier on, it wouldn't have been an issue. And there were several things like that where I had to take it apart after I had put it together because of an error that I made. I'm pretty lucky too, outside of also looking ahead and reading what other people have done and watching some other videos. There's people that watch our videos that have already put these together, and they gave me some great advice, particularly in relation to some cables that go down here in his legs. You really want to make sure that those are measured out right, that they're in there right. I actually ruined one of the cables at one point in time trying to re-lengthen it, and that was an issue. Now, one of the first things that I did too, I wanted to make sure that I had the right experience. I never contacted the agent that was in charge of me, basically, for the videos. When I had problems, I would contact their customer service. And I was able to do that with Box One because I had some problems with being able to log into my account. I contacted them.
Thank you for calling Fanhome. How may I help you today?
Yeah, I'm having some problems being able to log into my account.
Okay.
I talked to them. I've never had a problem with being able to get a hold of them. It appears that they're based out of America, and I have had to call them a number of times. One of the biggest things that does happen is I would get the wrong part, and they must have accidentally sent it in place of this right here. Inside the package, and so I'd have to call them and say I need the other part. I would generally get it within 3 days with no problem. There was also a part that broke, and I contacted them and said, hey, I broke this, is there any chance? And they were like, no problem, don't worry, you know, this will be free of charge. They didn't know that I was doing this on YouTube or anything like that. There was no special, you know, help. And I'll say too, that there were several times when I contacted them where when I asked them for the part, it was so confusing, and yet they seemed to get it right off the bat. They knew exactly what I was talking about. They knew, you know, the number that I needed, and they sent it out. And I would always be holding my breath because they're like, I don't know if they really understood what I meant about that. And sure enough, the right part would arrive in the mail. So my customer service experience with Fanhome has been awesome. The shipping was always fast. Even when there was the holdup with shipping, because you could track it. I could see that it was sitting in these docks. That at the same time, once when things got moving, it was here within a couple of days. Fanhome was initially based out of the same state that I'm in, which I didn't know either. So initially, when they would contact me and say that something was on its way, literally I'd get it the next day. Now they're just, you know, they're still pretty close statewide. I know that there was some concerns by people when they changed their shipping facilities and when they changed their location, but since then, actually, I think that they operate better since then. Another thing that happened that's pretty important to bring up is that eagle moss which was a company similar to Fanhome. They had a lot of these DeAugustini models. People would contact me and say, hey, you know, I'd really rather have this model or that model and stuff. I don't know if I want to go with this. And then Eagle Moss shut down. And there's all these people that were kind of stuck. They were stuck in limbo because they couldn't get the rest of their parts. And that's always the fear. There's always the concern. It's not that it can't happen. It is a possibility. But at the same time, when that did happen, Fanhome did take over some of those builds, like the Ecto 1 and the Back to the Future DeLorean. And so people were able to continue from where they left off. Fanhome also has this deal that if you decide, you know, I don't want to keep doing the boxes right now, you can just cancel your subscription. And then if you decide later on that you want to restart, they will restart it from where you left off. I also got to give it to people who, when Eagle Moss went down, and there was those fans who are like, I just have these tubes and that ladder left to do on my Ecto 1, that there was, you know, a lot of third-party fans that were able to recreate some of those parts so that people could also try and get them done until, you know, Fanhome took it over. If you watched our last video, you got to see a lot of things that R2 does. He actually even does even more than that. There's different functions for everything from making him dance to walking around. His lightsaber goes up and down. He can project Princess Leia or Luke. He can actually see, and you can see through his eyes. He can hear you. The thing that I didn't know until after I had him built, basically, and the end of the magazine has some instructions for you. He even has facial recognition, so he can actually see you and follow your face as you move it around. He also has quite the personality. He tends to just do random things every now and then. Always takes me by surprise. He's highly detailed. Something I didn't get to show in the other video is that he also has all of the tools that you can pull out and all these little compartments that open up, and then of course you can also open up his arms like that. Like I said, with Iron Man, the biggest things are there's a lot of parts to hold on to. There's a lot of parts to hold on to that allow you to do different things with him. So in answer to the question, was it worth it? The answer that I would say is, yeah, actually, I think it was. You know, the cost, which people have asked me before too, is different. It's different for everyone because it's based on when you subscribe, the coupon code you use, things like that. But generally speaking, the overall cost that I kind of guessed on is still less than or about the same as if I was to buy him pre-assembled, for example. Buying a figure of this size, pre-assembled, that's, you know, die-cast metal, would be much more than that. So as far as that value goes, and if I was to resell him for some reason, yeah, I think I'd get, you know, much more than what I paid into it. So yeah, I do. I feel like it's worth it. But going back to the conversation I had with the guys, would I do it again? I mean, I guess that depends on whether or not I'd had that opportunity. That's right, it doesn't end here. We're going to continue with the Back to the Future DeLorean, the Star Trek Next Generation Enterprise D, and yes, even the Millennium Falcon. So stay tuned, keep watching, like, subscribe, comment below. This has been your Geek Fix.